Welcome again to our Tuesday night shiur. We're going to speak tonight about Parashat Kedoshim, and really, this is an area where many of us fear to venture. It seems like this idea of Kedusha, this idea of holiness, is an idea that's a little bit far-fetched for everybody. It's an idea that seems to be a little bit above our heads. But I think that the journey tonight, if you allow me, we're going to take a journey to a place, to a destination which hopefully should become our home. And we're going into a gate where this gate has no end. It's a gate that hopefully tonight, a place that's going to change our lives. It's going to give us a new ideas. It's going to give us new ways of thinking. And that ultimately it's going to hopefully change our life and realize how we can break all kinds of limitations and to become that person that we were created to become, that Tselem Elokim, that person that was created in the image of godliness. And we see it says, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber kol adat bnei Yisrael, speak to all the Jewish people, va'amart lehem kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem. Firstly, you see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu not only is giving us the commandments, it's a demand, it's a direction, he's dictating that one has to be holy. A person has to be holy. There is no other choice. And if you look at the Midrash says like this, Tana Rabbi Chia, Parasha zo ne'emra be'akel. This was like the second Har Sinai, when Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to Am Yisrael and Hashem conveyed this message of holiness. Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to Am Yisrael and he was telling them that everybody has to be here. It's a second Har Sinai. The commandments were spoken again. It's Har Sinai again. So really, it says, "Mipnei sherov gufei Torah tluim bo." They repeated the Aseret Dibrot. They repeated everything else. Comes the Midrash and tells us, "Lefichach ne'emra parasha zo be'akel kol adat bnei Yisrael lelamdecha, to teach you she'kedusha chala al katan ve'gadol al nashim ve'anashim." This idea of holiness, this idea is really an idea that is an idea for everybody. It has to be on everybody. Everybody's getting this idea. Everybody has to become holy. There's no somebody who's too old or too young. There's nobody who's too old or too young for this, the Midrash says. And he continues and it says, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Lama ne'emar parasha zo l'Yisrael dafka. Why is the Kadosh Baruch Hu talking to Am Yisrael? This idea of holiness should be something that has been spoken to everybody. It shouldn't only be spoken to the Jewish people. Listen to the Midrash, what it says. Amar Rabbi Yudan Rabbi Yishem Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman. Lema davar domeh. What is this like? Lelamdecha, to teach you she'imilech adam b'darkei boro. If a person walks in the ways of Hashem, kadosh yomar lo. If a person walks in the ways of Hashem, you become holy. You become a person of holiness. Meaning that it says, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Everybody had to come to this meeting. Whether you were a woman, child, man, everybody came to this meeting of Parashat Kedoshim. It was a meeting that was said to all the Jewish people, and all the 10 commandments were repeated in Parashat Kedoshim. So where did this idea of Kedusha start from? You can see if the Midrash the Torah tells us that the idea of Kedoshim means lifosh me'arayot, that a person, we have desires. The main two desires that really control an individual is the desire of eating and the desire of lust. Really, there were two angels called Azav ve'Azazel. Azav ve'Azazel, when Hashem created man, they said to God, God, look at this man, you created him, and look what he's doing day and night. He's not fulfilling his task. So Hashem says, really, you think you can do a better job? Let me put you down into this world. And where do we get this introduction of Kedusha? Where do we get this introduction of Liot Kadosh, that a person who should become holy? So as Azav and Azazel went down into the world, as they were angels, they went down into the world and they saw the women of the world. And the women were very beautiful. And they went and they tried to seduce them. And the women of the world at that moment were holy. And they told them, you know what? we'll give in to your seduction, but if you teach us the holy name, if you teach us the Shema Mefurash, that holy name, and the women convinced Azav Azazel to teach them those holy names. And what did these women do? They used the holy name. What did they do in order to use the holy name? To disappear from the world, in order not to fall into the seduction of Azza and Azazel. So Hashem said to those angels, you see my people in the world? You see how holy they are? So this idea of coming into holiness is something for all of us. And what I want to go into this journey of tonight and say, the Torah tells us Kedushim to you. You have to become holy. Yet the Torah doesn't tell us how to become holy. It says Kedushim to you, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem. So Hashem compares us to Him. Since I'm holy, you have to become holy. And really, this is the gate. You know, many times we talk about a person's learning Torah. Many times we talk about, like we did last week, Lashon Hara, and a person's attributes and everything that we have to develop on. But really, this is the foundation of Judaism. Kedusha, holiness, is the foundation of Judaism. When a person becomes holy, everything else falls into place. And you see that when we wake up in the morning, we say, Asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav. What does that mean? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to do His mitzvot. But what does it say? Kideshanu. You sanctified us with your mitzvot. When a person does a mitzvah, he becomes sanctified. There's a transportation. Something happens to you. And that's what we know. We've said many times there are 613 mitzvot against the correlating body parts of a person. But the Orach Chaim says something very interesting. He said, if you take the word mitzvah, how is it spelled? Mem tzadik vav hey. Mem tzadik vav hey. Now, if you take the words, the letters mem tzadik, and a formula of atbash, atbash means that you switch the letters. So the mem and the tzadik, the mem becomes a vav, the tzadik becomes a hey. Sorry, the mem and the tzadik, they become we have mitzvahs vav hey. So therefore, the mem and the tzadik, they become yud vav. They become hey yud. What does it mean hey yud? The Shem Hashem. The tzaddik and the mem become hey yud. So right away, and then you have vav hey. How do you spell the name of Hashem? Yud K vav K. Right away, when a person does a mitzvah, when an individual does a mitzvah, the name of Hashem encloses him inside of him. So right away, when you wake up in the morning and you say, Baruch atah Hashem asher kideshanu, that you sanctified us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have said, Baruch atah Hashem asher, a person to do, but it says you sanctified us. You sanctified us with this mitzvah. So this idea of kedushim to you has to embed a person through thought, speech, and action. One time a Jew came to Rav Zusha, and he said to Rav Zusha, he says, the holy Rav Zusha, how are Jews different than anybody else? What makes us different? So Rav Zusha said to him as follows. He said, do you go to work? He said, yeah, Rebbe, of course I go to work. He says, why do you go to work? So the person was playing along. He says, Rav Zusha, the holy Rav Zusha is spending time with me, asking me, why do I go to work? He said, I need to make money. He says, why do you need to make money? Because I need to buy food. Why do you need to buy food? Because I need to feed the children. So he says to him, so why do you need to feed the children? He says, Rebbe, what do you mean why I need to feed the children? I need to feed the children so we can serve God. Oh, said to him, Rav Zusha, call in Alex, the carriage rider. Bring Alex, the carriage rider, over here, and let's see the difference between you and him. So he comes in, says, oh, holy Rebbe, how can I help you? He says, Alex, why do you work? He says, Rebbe, this is what a Rebbe talks about. What do you mean, why do I work? I need money. Says to him, but why do you need money? Says to him, because I need to eat. Says to him, why do you need to eat? Says, because I need strength. Says to him, but why do you need strength? So I can get up and work tomorrow. So the Rebbe turned to his son, he says, do you see the difference between a Jew and you see the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew? When this is what a Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani. Hashem says, you know what a Jew does? Kedusha can mean two things. Holiness can mean that a person should separate himself from the world. And the more separated you are from the world, the holier you are. But the Torah teaches us something different. It tells us, not only do we not need to separate ourselves from the world, Hashem has given us a harder task. I want you to engage in the world. And when you engage in the world, that's where you become holy. meaning that something that could supposedly take you away from holiness has to bring about holiness. Not only is the engagement in the world going to infuse you with holiness, you have to infuse the world with holiness in itself. The Marsha tells us something very interesting. He says, what is this power of Kedusha? How does a person become holy? He says something unbelievable. He says, Shal yedei machshava v'ratzon, when a person has proper thoughts and proper desires, nitan livroa melachim, you create angels. When you have proper desires, you create angels. And those angels, what are they doing? What are those angels doing? Asher mesayim lanu me'od me'od ba'avodat Hashem yitbarach. V'zeh kol rega v'rega b'chayei yom yom. In every second of our life, with our thoughts, speech, and action, we have the power to create holy angels. And the sole job of those angels are to help us in avodat Hashem, to help us get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And really, the Midrash says something very interesting. Kedoshim to you, says the Midrash Tanchuma. Lama, why is Hashem demanding of us to be holy? Well, the Torah really answered it. Ki kadosh ani. What does that mean? Because I am holy? Lefi shidbakti etchem b'matnai. Says Hashem, I glued you on to my hip. Shene'emar ki kasher yidbaka ezor al-matnav. In the same way that since you're glued to Kadosh Baruch Hu, Amar lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, ani kemelech basar v'dam. I'm not like an ordinary king. Melech basar v'dam, en reshut labriot likarot b'shmo. When you have a normal kingship, you can't go to the people of that country and call them in the name of the king. Rather, says the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm not like a king. Aval Yisrael nikra'u kedoshim, shene'emar kedoshim to you. You are holy like me. And keshem she'adam mekadesh et atzmo milemata, in the same level that you infuse yourself with kedusha from here, mekachim oto milemala. Therefore, in above, they make you holy. We call this itaruta deletata. When a person awakens holiness from the below, they put holiness into him. So many of us ask, how come we don't have desires? Desires to get closer to Hashem. And this is something that everybody has to do. This is the portal that everybody has to transform himself into. You're right that we do mitzvot, but how does a person do mitzvot? Is it a routine, or are you engaged in an act of kedusha? We said this many times. The Baal Shem Tov says something unbelievable. He says when a person starts this journey of Hashem sfatai tiftach ufi agid tilatecha, you're about to engage in prayer. You're about to meet the Creator. He said that from the time that you took those 3 steps forward to the time where you take those 3 steps backwards, you're the same individual. You failed in your tefillah. Imagine the potency, what happens to a Jew when he meets his Creator. And we do this 3 times a day. Really, after once, we should be walking like angels. Imagine what should happen to us after 3 times a day when we're engaged in prayer with the Creator of the world, with the being that's the holiest of the holy. Therefore, we have to come and we have to rethink about our approaches to tefillah. We have to rethink about our approaches to the commandments. And that's what the Marsha says. When a person is thinking about godliness, when you're thinking about holiness, when you go into the world, like the Baal Shem Tov says, that really the Baal Shem Tov taught us that even eating could be holy. Why? Because what happens when a person eats? It's not an animalistic act. When a person eats, you're taking the world, you're taking the energy from that world, and you're elevating it. You're elevating that piece of meat. That piece of meat now is a kosher piece of meat, says the Baal Tanya. It's at a neutral state. Comes the Jew and engages in that piece of meat. He eats it. And he takes it and now he elevates it. Why does he elevate it? Because the nutrients from that piece of meat, they go inside of him. And now he goes and he learns Torah. He goes and he does a good deed with somebody else. He has taken that level of meat and he's elevating it from something neutral and he's made it holy. That's what we're doing throughout the week. Sheshet yamim taseh melachtecha. When the Torah tells us that what kind of work are we doing throughout the 6 days, we're infusing the world with Kedusha. The whole world is being infused with Kedusha. That's why on Shabbat, what happens on Shabbat? Sheshet yamim taseh melachtecha uvayom hashvi Shabbat laHashem Elokecha Lo ta'asor b'kol melacha. You shouldn't do any work. What work are we not supposed to be doing in the world? During the week, we become the givers to the world. We're infusing the world with Kedusha. What happens Friday night? And this is that taste that we get every week. Everybody feels Shabbat probably the most Friday night. Why? Because that's usually the biggest transition from the mundane to the world of holiness. You come into that place of holiness, that's the biggest transition. That Friday night feeling that everybody loves. Why does everybody love Friday night? You're right away, you're introduced to a little bit of holiness. That's why it's 160th, Shabbat is 160th of Olam Haba. Because Olam Haba is a place of Kulo Tov, it's a place of holiness. So Friday night, everybody feels that Kedusha. And when we feel that Kedusha Friday night, all of a sudden, not only do we change, our perception changes. Our mindset should be changing. We look at everything and even the occurrences that happen to us throughout the week, we look at it differently. That's your introduction to the world of holiness. Friday night is the introduction to the world of holiness. It's where a person becomes a kadosh. He becomes holy, where the angels are in your home and you're singing to them. And at some point you even tell them that they have to leave. Why do you want them to leave? Because Hashem himself comes to you. Because since you're holy, Hashem comes down to you because he's holy. Now, how do you know that you did your job? How do you know that a person facilitated Kiddushim to you? How do you know that you really infused the world with holiness? That all depends on how you feel on Shabbat. Because on Shabbat, you become the taker. It says about the Orach Chaim HaKadosh that really the Orach Chaim HaKadosh did not eat throughout the week. He ate very minimally throughout the week. But when it came to Shabbat, they said that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh especially engaged in the food of Shabbat. Why? Because the food of Shabbat gives you holiness. The Orach Chaim throughout the week, his whole life was holy. Every moment was utilized for Torah, for mitzvot, for helping others. So his engagement in the world was different. But we don't have to be on that level, but to understand the point where throughout the week, I'm infusing the world with holiness. On Shabbat, the world infuses me. And in the world of holiness, in the world of Kedusha, there's time, there's space, and we're transcending that. Says Shlomo HaMelech, Ma'itron la'adam asher hu amal tachat hashemesh. What good is it for man for the toil that he does under the sun? So where are you going to be toiling? Says Shlomo HaMelech, you're right, you've been put into a physical world. You've been put into a world that's guided by nature. But you know what you have to do? You have to transcend that world. Kedusha means that a person has to transcend the world. And every act that you do, you're going above the sun. You're going to a place where you're no longer limited by time or space. If you ever look at the big rabbis, you look at the things that they accomplished in their life, you say a person in 10 lives, in 20 lives can't accomplish that. Why? Because they elevated themselves to a state where they were no longer bound by time. They were no longer bound by space. They were able to help many people across the world. Kedusha is that introduction to a world that knows no bounds. Comes the Ramban and tells us like this. Veda, he says, Shadrisha miklal Yisrael, that demand of the Jewish people, liot kedushim, novat ma'uvda she'Hashem bachar b'Yisrael. The fact that Hashem chose us, that's what demands of us to be holy. V'natan lahem chelek elokam imal, shitchuna pnimit shel kedusha. When a Kadosh Baruch Hu bred in us our neshama, that's what made us have to be holy. V'kol asher aleim la'asot, says the Ramban, that everything that they have to do, legdulata v'ladira be'emtzaut mitzvot haTorah. So through the functions of the Torah, through the functions of the commandments, that's what makes a person holy. That's what transcends to you. When you want to meet your true self, you haven't met that individual until you engage in the world of holiness, till you become kadosh. And we know that everybody can become a kadosh. That's why it says, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. It's one of the mitzvot where a Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Be'akel, make sure you gather everybody. And really Moshe Rabbeinu repeated the 10 commandments here. Why are you repeating the 10 commandments? Why in this parasha, out of all parashiot, in this week's portion, is Moshe Rabbeinu repeating the 10 commandments? So really, I think that Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to tell us, until now, you might have looked at these commandments as physical action. Person puts on his tefillin, a woman lights her Shabbat candles. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, I need you to engage in these ideas, not as in actions, but in things that transform you, in things that transcend. So therefore, when you look at the 10 commandments, you have to look at them now with new eyes, with holy eyes. You know, when the baby comes into the world, it says, Mashbi'im oto tiyeh tzadik ve'al tiyeh rasha. You have to become a righteous person. So tonight, we understand that if a person tells you you're a tzaddik, oh, what are you going to say? No, I'm not a tzaddik. What does it mean to be a tzaddik? It means that there's a gate that each and every one of us has to walk through. And that's the gate of holiness. That's the gate of Kedusha. Because every person was born into the world with a certain character trait and something that he's lured more into. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh that when a person captures that character trait and you're no longer enslaved to that character trait, Kadosh Yomam. You're considered to be Kadosh even greater than somebody else that might look like to the onlooker that he's miles ahead. You're at a greater level. And the Orach Chaim says this beautifully. He asks a question. He says, we see by Shaul HaMelech, we know that the way that the Torah describes Shaul HaMelech, Mishichmo v'mala, he was the greatest tzaddik of the Jewish people. He was very modest. He was ketinok shenolad, meaning in a state of a sin. He was like a little baby. That's the purity of Shaul. Says the Orach Chaim, we see something very interesting. With all the purity of Shaul, and with the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls him the head of the Jewish people, he did one thing that was wrong, and he lost the kingship not only from himself, he lost the kingship from all of Shevet Binyamin, until the kingship was given to David HaMelech. Says the Orach Chaim, but you look at the life of David HaMelech, and you see that David HaMelech, as great as he was, there were a few things that we question about David HaMelech that are hard to understand. Says the Orach Chaim, you know what the difference is? How was David HaMelech born? With what character traits? And how was Shaul born? Shaul was a very balanced individual. And because he was such a balanced individual, for Shaul to waver a little bit from that balance was big. David HaMelech was born red. He was born fire. He had a big Yetzer Hara. His evil inclination was something catastrophic. And because even though David HaMelech, to the onlooker, did things that seemingly are not correct in the eyes of the Torah, says the Orach Chaim, if the personality of David was given to Shaul, he would have done much worse than David. That's why David Melech Israel, that's why David HaMelech is called the Kadosh. So when a person looks at himself in the mirror and you look at these great rabbis and you ask yourself, look at these people used to fast for a week at a time. Look how they pray, and then you look at yourself and maybe I'm not in that category. No, this week's Parsha tells us everybody is in the category of Kedusha. Everybody has to be a Kadosh. Every single person has to become holy. So really, this idea is what's going on in our hearts. Kedusha means what's happening in your hearts. What are you desiring? When Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Am Yisrael that a Kadosh Baruch Hu demands of them to be Kadosh, he's telling him a Kadosh Baruch Hu made you Kadosh, as in comes the Midrash and tells us that Hashem says to Am Yisrael, you know why you have to be holy? Because I'm like the king and you're like the queen. And since I'm the king and my depiction is holy, my queen has to be holy. The Zohar tells us like this, Tana Rabbi Abba, Parshada, this parasha, this idea of Kedoshim, Klala Deoraitahi. You want to know the whole Torah? You want to know the whole purpose? You want to know everything on one foot? Says the Zohar Kadosh, this is the parasha. Chotma de Kshuta de Gushpankai, Parshada Itchajun Rezi'in Iliin Deoraita. In this parasha is the greatest secrets that have ever been brought down to the world. With all the punishments and the 10 commandments, when Rabbi Shimon and this holy group that he used to teach to, when they would reach this parasha of Kedoshim, they became happy. Why would they become happy? Because they realized that in order to be able to do any other commandment, you need to have holiness. What makes the other commandments, when a person does a mitzvah, he creates an angel. That angel has to have, you want a full angel? You want an angel that looks good, has a nice suit, he has both legs, both arms. How do you do that? It depends on how you engage in that mitzvah. If a person came to the mitzvah with what the Torah called chilu uchimu, you came and you prepared yourself for that meeting, you prepared yourself for mitzvah, because we know that every mitzvah is a present that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the person. So when a person takes that present and he engages in it with holiness, it's a whole different experience. So that's what the Zohar says. The Zohar tells us that when they came to this parasha, when they came to this place, they were all excited. Why? Because they knew that this was going to give them those new eyes on how to perform every other mitzvah. We know Mashiach. How does the Torah describe Mashiach? V'nacha alav ruach Hashem. And a godly spirit will come upon him. A godly spirit, says the Tana Dev Eliyahu. Listen to the Tana Dev Eliyahu. It says, you want to acquire Ruach HaKodesh? You want to be called the holy person? Says the Tana Dev Eliyahu. Eliyahu Navi says to you, I have a message for you. Mashbi ani shamayim va'aretz. I take an oath, says Eliyahu Navi, and I command the heaven and the earth. Ben, whether it's a katan, whether it's a small person, whether it's a child, man or woman, ish or isha, akol kefi ma'asav. Ruach HaKodesh comes to a person, the divine spirit rests upon a person according to his action. Says the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Vaya machanecha kadosh, you have to make your camp holy. Why do you have to make your holy? Listen to the words. Ki ani mitalech bekirbecha. I'm walking inside of you, says Hashem. Can you imagine? Hashem is walking inside of each and every single one of us. So therefore, the Torah tells us, says the Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm used to, you know what I'm used to? A home of Kedusha. I'm used to, in my palace, there's only holiness. So when I come to your palace, when I come to you, make sure that you depict the holiness that I'm used to. If a person wants that a Kadosh Baruch Hu should reside inside of him, that the divine spirit should rest upon him, you have to engage in a life of holiness. The Rav Chaim Vital wrote a whole gate about this. He called it Shar Kedusha. He called it the gate of holiness. He explains to a person how to slowly but surely rise to a level of prophecy. Even though we don't have prophecy today, but a person could access divine spirit. You could access Ruach HaKodesh. If a person works on himself and every engagement into the world, a person becomes holier, then it becomes like a magnet. You and a Kadosh Baruch Hu are a magnet. The only thing is that there's things separating between you and the magnet. We know that at the end of days, it says, Kol hanishar b'Tzion, whoever is left over in Zion, whoever is left over in Yerushalayim before the days of Mashiach, what does it say about him? Kadosh yomar lo, that he's holy. What kept you in the trials and tribulations of life? That when you did a mitzvah, it doesn't matter how many. When you sat down and you learned Torah, it doesn't matter for how long. How did you do? Were you holy? And the holiness is like a plug of a Jew. Because the way that we think depends on how we carry ourselves. What does that mean? If a person is holy, your mind's going to work differently. Your eyes work differently. The Maharal says that the greatest power that a Jew has are his eyes. So we know many times, there's a story where they went to the Baba Sali, and there was a person who passed away and they couldn't find his body. So they went to the Baba Sali, and they asked him where could they find this individual. So the Baba Sali sat down there, and he drew them an exact map of where they could find the body of the individual. So the map was, I think, somewhere in London. They asked the Baba Sali, they came to him and they said to him, how do you know? You've never been to London, you've never been to Europe, you've never been to that part of the country. How do you know exactly to draw a map, to find the person in a place that you never were, to depict streets and everything? Because when a person is holy, there is no limitations. We are not blocked by anything. What sees is not our eyes. What sees is our soul. The eye is the vehicle through which the soul sees. Therefore, the Baba Sali wasn't blocked by anything. The world was his oyster. Everything was open to him. Why? Because he wasn't looking at the world with eyes. He was looking at the world with the neshama. The eyes were the vehicle. And when you look at the world, when you're in neshama, when a person is in a stature of holiness, then everything is open to you. Says a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani. I want you to be like me. The whole reason you came down to this world is that I wanted, HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls us Mamlechet Kohanim Vegoy Kadosh. Ve'atem Elokim, you're called gods. What does it mean that a person becomes called God? In order to become a God, you have to emulate God. How? Ki kadosh ani. I'm holy. You have to be holy. Says the Midrash as follows. It says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Am Yisrael, Amar lehem Ashma Am Kol Elokim, they heard the voice of Hashem. Ilu haya katov Kol Hashem bekocho. It doesn't say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke with his power. Lo haya olam yachol la'amod, the world couldn't stand. What power did HaKadosh Baruch Hu speak with? Ela Kol Hashem b'koach. Hashem spoke with what? With a power. Which power? Bekoach shel kol echad ve'echad. Abachurim lefi kochan. The teenagers according to their ability. Askenim lefi kochan. The elderly according to their ability. Aktanim lefi kochan. The little kids according to their ability. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, says Hashem to the Jewish people. Lo bishvel sheshamatim kolot harbeh. He says to the Jewish people, you should know that I spoke to you according to your ability. And that's what the gate of Kedusha is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu demands of you to become holy according to your ability. That's why the Torah here says Kedoshim to you. It's a demand. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm demanding of you. You don't have a choice whether it's not you want to be or you don't want to be. Hashem says you have to be. And we know that the 613 mitzvot are really a step to becoming moral. And really a person could be moral. And without the mitzvot, yes, a person can be moral, but he's not necessarily holy. In order to be holy, you also have to be moral. In order to be moral, you don't necessarily always have to be holy. So yes, a person can be moral, but the Torah demands of us a higher level. The Torah demands of us that we transcend the idea of time and space. Shabbat transcends the idea of time. A person can transcend the idea of space. You see many times that tzaddikim were able to overlap those ideas. That's why this journey tonight is a place that we went to, that we have to make it our home. You know, one time a reporter comes to a big Rebbe, and he says to him, Rebbe, you know, I've heard a lot about you. I've heard that you give blessings to people. Do you mind if I sit here for the day? I just want to take back. I want to see what a life in the day of a Rebbe is. So the reporter sat down, and as he's sitting down, he sees people coming into the Rebbe and asking him certain questions, and the Rebbe answers them, and he gives them advice, and he gives them blessings. So after the day is over, the reporter says, Rebbe, is it okay if I approach you? He says, sure. He says, you know, I watched you throughout the whole day. And you know, really, I could do what you did. Yeah, people come to you, they ask questions, you answer them. They ask you for a blessing, you give them a blessing. Because really, what's the difference between you and anybody else? Says the Rebbe to the reporter, you know what? It's a good point. So I'll tell you what the difference is between a Rebbe and somebody else. Says we're both going to get up from this office, and we're both going to walk out the same door, and we're both going to walk down the same corridor. And as we leave the building, we're both going to pass by the same apple tree. And he says, we're both going to pick an apple, and we're both going to eat it. He says, you know what the difference between me and you is? He says, when you take that apple, you'll make a blessing in order to eat the apple. He says, when I take the apple, you know the difference is? You know why I'm not making a blessing in order to eat the apple. I'm eating the apple in order to make a blessing. That's Kedusha. That's holiness. Am I engaging in this world because the world gives me an opportunity to become holy? Am I taking that food, that piece of food, or that engagement in the world because it's an opportunity to connect to Hashem? Or am I making the blessing because I'm hungry? Says the Rebbe, that's the difference between somebody who's holy and somebody who's just going through life. When you put on those tefillin, is it a moment where you're connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where there's a satellite, there's a connection between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and everything else fades in the way? Or is it just something that you do on a daily basis? That's Kedoshim to you. That's why it says, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav. What does it mean, Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav? That every time you engage in a mitzvah, When you come to a woman, what do you say to her? When a person gets married and he wants to ask a woman to marry, what do you say to her? You're becoming holy to me. And we know that Baal v'isha is ishto kegufo. His wife is like his body. It's becoming one entity. Therefore, the idea of Kedusha, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know why we say Asher Kideshanu b'mitzvotav? Like the Orach Chaim says, because every time you engage in a mitzvah, you're becoming one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're becoming holy. So when you go to that mitzvah, you have to approach it with holiness. You have to approach it that the divine spirit is resting upon you. And you're becoming like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're becoming one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what the Orach Chaim is telling us. This is why the word itself, mitzvah, if you take the letters of Ad Bash, like we said in the beginning, it's the Shem Hashem. It's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Vav Hei, which is the last two letters of the mitzvah, and Mem Tzadik, when you take them in Ad Bash, they become Yud Kei. So every time a person does a mitzvah, godliness rests upon you until a person becomes Kadosh. We know by Yaakov Avinu, when he transcended this world, that's why it says Yaakov Avinu lo met. Really, dying doesn't mean dying. It means we're passing away. Why do we call somebody passing away? Why do we say somebody passed away? It's not a Jewish term to say somebody died. He passed away. Where did he go? He simply was going from one place to another. It says by Yaakov Avinu that his transcendence from this world to the world to come was as easy as somebody taking off a jacket. His whole life was holiness. Therefore, that transcendence to go from one place to another was a simple transformation. That's what we're saying. We have to be like the Orach Chaim says. We have to be like Rav Zusha says. When we go to work, what are we thinking about? Because imagine what the Maharsha says. Every thought, speech, and action creates an angel. Abal eta'er mesa'in oto. When the Torah says abal eta'er, you know what it says? You're coming to become purified. It doesn't say you're coming to be a Talmid Chacham. You're coming to engage in mitzvot. It says abal eta'er mesa'in oto. Somebody who wants to feel this idea of holiness, they give him help. They give him assistance. Because like the Maharsha says, every time you think about holiness, every time you have a good thought, you create an angel. And that angel's sole job is to help you become godly, is to help you become more holy. That's why the Torah says Kedoshim to you. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu, usually when Moshe Rabbeinu would give over an idea in Torah, he would call Aaron. And he would teach it to Aaron, and Aaron would teach it to his children, and his children would teach it to somebody. He would call Yoshua, he would teach to Yoshua, to Aaron, and to his children, and they would teach it to somebody else. In this week's parashat Kedoshim, everybody had to be gathered together. Because what Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching them wasn't just another commandment. It was the idea that everything stands upon. Because if there is no Kedusha, the Torah, everything else doesn't fall into place. It's not an intellectual pursuit. That's the idea of Kedoshim to you. And that's why Kadosh Baruch Hu demands it. He says, Kedoshim to you ki kadosh ani. Since we're one, I'm holy, you have to be holy. So I hope that this journey that we went to tonight, this journey has to become our home. We have to become holy beings. And that means that in everything that we engage, then our life will look different. Our relationships will look different. And that's really the challenge that we leave for every single one of us tonight. Where is it in my life that I can take things to a higher level? Where is it that I know there's one area in every single one of us that there's something that's pulling us? There's a tug of rope always. When you push the rope a little bit, where is it that I can become holy? Where is it that I can transcend my reality? That I can be like Shlomo Melech says, "Ma'itron la'adam asher amal tachat hashemesh." Why is it for a person that he's toiling under the sun? You're supposed to be above the sun. You're supposed to be above nature. And we can come to that time, Shekol Asher Nishar B'Tzion, when Mashiach finally comes and greets us, Kol Asher Nishar B'Tzion, whoever will be left in Yerushalayim, Kadosh Yomar Lo. He'll be a person of holiness. Why? Because in everything that he engaged in, every single thing, he looked for the godliness in it. He looked for the holiness in it. He didn't make a blessing in order to eat. He ate in order to make a blessing. We'll stop with that.